I want to welcome everybody. Finally, we get some nice cool weather. Also, Mary Ellen, you want to do the welcome notice of the meeting statement, please?
Sure. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the October 19th, 2017 Commission meeting was mailed October 17th, 2017 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disability and Special Needs Central Administrative Office, video conference location, and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations, such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Excuse me, could you speak up a little louder?
Sure.
Some of us feel.
Two seconds, y'all. It's all confirmation.
Yeah.
So at least have one person. Is that okay with you? Sorry, y'all. We have an education statement.
Certainly. Let's reflect together a moment. We each arrived today as individuals, all with unique ideas and experiences, but all with needs of many types. Citizens and families request assistance or redress. Providers request collaboration and cooperation with or change from the department and the commission. All offer their concerns, and we're grateful for their courage to speak and for their trust in this process. This is a room in which there are many challenging debates, moments of tension or frustration, and ideological division. Guests, staff, and commission members each may have their own agendas, but this is also a room where we come to work together and where we have much more in common than we may realize or remember during our discussions. Let us be mindful that this room is also filled with our human family with common values and needs. Let us cherish and celebrate our shared capacity for reason and compassion. Our similarities and our ability to recognize the value and the worth of our entire community is what unifies us and moves us forward. In the end, our separate needs and goals and agendas must merge into a shared coordinated effort. This commission must speak and act as a unified body rather than individuals, and in concert with allied consumers, families, and providers. We must work together for things to work at all. We must require this of ourselves, and so be it.
Thank you. May I have introductions? May I start at the front, please?
Singing along with Pakistan Foundation.
Tim Smith for the Greenville News.
Angela Rodriguez from South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association. Heather McPherson, Richland County.
Kelvin Felder, SCDDSN.
Community Outcome.
David, South Carolina Center for Disability Resources.
Mike Keith, Marion Dillon, DSN.
Ann Baldwin, BDSN.
John Reynolds, here to represent my brother who resides in the Tribal this month.
She's my hand.
Linda Lee, I have a daughter at Witten Center, and I represent Witten Center Parents Club and PATH.
Good morning, Kathleen Roberts, Witten Center Parents Club. I have two sons who have served for 30+ years, at which center they have passed, but we remain strong and involved with the center that we love.
Jerry Mize, Oconee DSN.
Bob Jones, Newberry, DSN.
Sherry Presley, South Carolina.
Reed Miller, South Carolina Developmental Disabilities Council.
Kathy Martin, Protection and Advocacy with Disabilities.
Marty Williamson, Arkansas, South Carolina.
Joyce Davis, Grand Injury Association, South Carolina.
Tina Mohan, CDSN. Laura Collins, Facebook, BSN.
Health First Hold on.
Jimmy Burton, Burton Center.
Jerry Bernard, Charles Wood Center.
Good morning, Kevin, BHDD-OIDD.
Okay, we know that we're from Tribal Development in Aiken. We're representing DuPont 2, 1, and Lawrence, and what's the other? Linden.
Marty Ball, CDDSN.
Captain Governor, Charles Wood,
Danny Gunn, Child Development Center. Sharon Kelly, support the family and food.
Bertie Cushman, I have a son that's in child development in a CPH, but I have a nephew also that's in an ICF on DuPont.
Susan Esther, I have a child that was in Midland Center from 85 to 91, and she is now at Linden House in Aiken.
I'm Joanne Berg. I have a daughter that is a resident of DuPont 2, which is an ICF facility in Aiken.
I'm David Rosling, my brother testified on it and lived in the low
Susan Dunn, Horry County DSN.
Judy Johnson, with Alcott Center.
Stephanie Williams, Allen County DSN.
Pat Miller, DSN. Alan Cornell, Horry County DSN.
Dexter Hall, DSN.
Heather Waddell, Child Development Center.
Michael Hall, Tribal.
And Kim Daly, I'm a member of the Aiken County Board of Disabilities. And my first cousin, Bobby Burkett, resides in one of the CTHs. My twin brother also is certified.
Thank you so much. And what a nice crowd from Aiken. I'm so glad y'all came. Could I have the adoption of the agenda, please? May I have a motion? A second. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the minutes of September 21st, 2017.
I just found something instead of my name.
Okay. All right.
This is the next regular meeting. It has the previous date, commission date.
Okay.
Commissions we changed to today's date.
Okay.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
The approval of the minutes for September 21st. Oops, that's not me, today's date, October 19th. Do you have a motion? So moved with that correction. Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, we have the public input. We, just so you know, I know there's a group that came in late today. We already have 5 people that are speaking. I'm going to allow one of the group that came in late to speak for all of you. If y'all want to take a second and figure out who it's going to be. I know I have one person who's already speaking from Aiken. That's great, but we've got a lot on the agenda today, and so that's the way it's going to be handled. All right? Thank you very much.
I will speak for the group.
Okay. When number 6, would you come up and state your name since I don't have anything? Okay. Thank you very much. All right, Susan John.
Good morning. Hello, I'm Susan John. I'm speaking on behalf of the Executive Director of the Horry County Disabilities and Special Needs today, not as the chair of the association. I came today to discuss the capacity proposed legislation regarding camera use in DDSN supported residential homes. Horry County DSN has utilized cameras since 2013 in some of our day program locations, as well as a select group of CTH2 homes. The decision to utilize cameras was not entered into lightly and was discussed first and foremost with those that are affected, the people that we serve directly. Following this discussion, it was brought before the Horry County DSN Board of Directors for consideration and approval. Once approved by the board and consumers fully understand the purpose of the cameras, they signed off on a consent agreement and the request was reviewed and approved by the Human Rights Committee. Please note that cameras were not and are not in every single home that is operated by BHDD-OIDD. It started with homes where consumers were more vulnerable, where behavior concerns were prevalent, and where there was a higher prevalence and incidence of alleged abuse and neglect, and higher incidences of false reporting. It has been proposed by some members of the commission the belief that camera use will decrease the incidence of abuse and neglect. I can tell you firsthand that this has not been the case in Horry County. In 2014 and 2015, we were substantially below the statewide average for A&E. In 2016, however, we were above the statewide average for abuse, neglect, and exploitation reporting. Please understand that one report involving multiple consumers can substantially change your reporting percentage, even though it might have only been one singular event that has impacted multiple people. This is what happened in 2016. It was not more incidents of abuse and neglect, but one singular incident involving multiple consumers. I believe it's more important to look at human nature. People are going to continue to act in a manner in which they normally act, regardless of whether cameras are in place or not. We see this every day in our communities. How many of you have been caught on camera running a red light and gotten the proverbial ticket with your picture in the mail saying, please return your money to whatever municipality? Even though we know there are cameras in place, did it change the way you chose to drive? How many times have we seen people caught on video looting businesses following a national disaster? Did that change their behavior and make them act differently? No. We see the same thing with camera use, so to think that cameras in DDSN residential homes or day programs are going to change people's manner in treating our consumers respectfully is absolutely false. What we have seen from camera use were some unintended outcomes. We have been able to substantiate rather quickly if an allegation was founded or unfounded. This has helped close some of the cases more quickly when it was clear there was no substantiation of abuse and neglect. This too has assisted in the area of closing cases of false reporting rather quickly. The second thing we've noticed is we've utilized video to assist consumers in visiting or reviewing their behavior in certain situations as part of their behavior support training. In some cases, it has greatly improved the consumer's overall behavior. Thirdly, we have utilized video playback in incidences involving workers' compensation claims. This assists the workers' comp claim manager in verifying the validity of claims. And lastly, we have even used the video to find out which staff person has driven over our lawns and damaged the sprinkler heads at the edge of the driveway. My point here is simply that camera use will not reduce incidents of abuse and neglect. People will continue to treat our consumers in a manner that reflects their human nature. Camera systems are costly. Aside from the initial cost, there are monthly monitoring costs. Add in the cost of the staff who review the video when issues arise. In our agency, there is absolutely no one who is sitting and watching video all day long. Should an incident arise, we can pull up the video coverage and review the footage to try and determine what happened. As an agency, we choose to utilize this as a tool in some of our locations. We were not forced to do such, and it's truly not the right fit for every situation. Even though as an agency we utilize this technology in some of our locations, I do not support the legislation presented on camera use. It should be left to the consumers and each individual provider having those conversations with the people that they support as to what is right for their location. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Deborah McPherson.
I was pleased to read in the Greenville News that Chairperson Ravenel has asked the Commission to focus on cutting the waiting list, reduce the incidence of abuse and neglect, and raising direct worker salaries to $15 per hour until these goals are achieved. I, like Ms. Ravenel, would like to see the system's intake system easier and more person-friendly. I would also advocate that those on the waiting list with aging caregivers be given priority. I support the goal of reducing the incidence of abuse and neglect. A key way to help reduce incidence of abuse and neglect is to hire qualified direct care staff and pay them wages in accordance with their job duties. Raising direct worker salaries to $15 per hour would help with the recruitment and retention of more qualified workers. While I fully support raises for direct care workers, I question the raises that were given the past 2 years to DDSN state employees making over $50,000. Nearly 29% of the state DDSN employees making over $50,000 received raises this past 2 years that averaged more than 3 times the 3% approved by the state. These employee raises range from 4 to 28% and resulted in increased recurring salaries and fringe benefit expenses costing more than $300,000 annually above the 3% approved state raises. These raises were given out like people give out Halloween candy and send a message that the work of these employees is more valued and important than the individuals on the front line providing direct care. The excuse given for these raises is that they were needed to bring salaries in line with other state agencies and or to keep employees from leaving DDSN. However, one position that received an 18% raise was the highest paid employee in the state with that job title classification. As if that raise was not enough, this employee's position was reclassified and given another raise recently according to the state administration website. This employee's salary has increased 28% since 2015. This employee's duties include responsibility for determining the means of safeguarding consumer funds. Given the recent newspaper articles about the consumer funds that were stolen by a house manager in Union County, I question why it took the local DSN board, Alliant, and DDSN nearly 5 years to make this discovery. Someone clearly failed to do their job. Key to the health and safety of individuals with disability is to encourage and support the involvement of their family. I know from personal experience with my grandparents and father-in-law in nursing homes that individuals with family involvement receive better care. DDSN staff have consistently attempted to deny parents the right to make healthcare decisions for their adult children with disabilities unable to consent unless they obtain legal guardianship. These attempts send a message that DDSN administration think they know what's better for these adults with disabilities unable to consent than their family members unless the family have the resources to obtain guardianship. The CMS final rule does not require family members to obtain guardianship to make healthcare decisions for those unable to consent. For those individuals who do not have legal appointed guardians, an individual's representative is anyone who's authorized to represent the individual for making personal or healthcare decisions either under state law or under policies of the state Medicaid agency, and includes but is not limited to a parent, a family member, or an advocate. The South Carolina Adult Healthcare Consent Act clearly gives family members the right and priority above DDSN to make healthcare decisions for adult individuals unable to consent without having to seek legal guardianship. I support the use of cameras in common areas as well as other means of available technology in homes where the individuals with disabilities are nonverbal and there have been multiple instances of abuse, neglect, and or elopements. Cameras in common areas of homes under these circumstances could provide protection for the individual with a disability as well as staff responsible for providing care. Tracking technology could have possibly prevented the 2 deaths that occurred from multiple elopements in the South Carolina mentor homes and the death at Pine Grove. While I support all 3 of the chairperson's goals for the commission, my top goal is to ensure our state is operating its waiver in compliance with Medicaid regulations as it relates to direct provider billing. DDSN providers in South Carolina have requested to directly bill Medicaid only to be told by DHHS and DDSN they're unable to do so. Medicaid regulations require any reassignment of Medicaid payments to be made voluntarily on the part of the provider. The state cannot mandate reassignment. When reassignment is made the preferred reimbursement methodology, the state must continue to make provision for direct payment of claims submitted by providers who do not choose to reassign their rights. The issue of direct Medicaid provider billing is directly related to the recent decision of Tri-Development Center to decide to discontinue their operation of its 4 ICFIDs impacting 32 consumers with disabilities. The funding ban payment for ICFID set by DDSN is not adequate to support operations as you were told by Mr. Courtney in June 2016 to no avail. Copies of his remarks from that meeting have been provided to you today. Perhaps the local board would not have been forced to make this decision if the funds for the recurring expenses of DDSN staff raises and benefits had been used to more adequately fund these ICFID placements, or Mr. Courtney and other providers have been allowed to directly bill Medicaid. The decision of this DSN board to discontinue operating its ICFIDs is a failure of CMS, DHHS, and DDSN to resolve this issue of those providers in South Carolina requesting to directly bill Medicaid. I hope that DDSN response is not that you will just find another provider to operate these beds and continue to ignore the fact that DDSN waivers are out of compliance with Medicaid regulations and that providers electing to directly bill Medicaid are denied. What qualified provider would want to take over the operation of these beds given that the funds provided by DDSN through funding bans are not adequate to operate a quality program? It appears you will just be setting up another provider to fail and or put the 32 consumers' health and safety in jeopardy. I look forward to your response and how you plan to address this issue impacting the lives of those living in ICFIDs. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared Bernard.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me talk for a few minutes. My name is Jerry Bernard. I'm the Executive Director of the Charles Lee Center. I'm actually talking today on behalf of the Charles Lee Center and our Board of Directors. I want to talk a little bit about the direct billing versus the ban payment system. Our board is a little bit ambivalent about this, and not because we necessarily oppose or support one or the other. We do agree that the current system that we have is not working. There are some real issues with the ban system, particularly in terms of ban B. But there's also been a lot of talk about direct billing. And there are some challenges with that because we don't have some answers to some of the questions that we have around that, which makes it difficult for our board to be able to decide what's the best course of action to take here. For and foremost, we don't know what the current rates are. So without having really understanding of what the rates are and what we could potentially get in terms of revenue, it makes it very difficult for us to be able to make some kind of informed decision. We also know that, and there's a typo here, it's not prospective but retrospective, we also know that if we do go to a fee-for-service, we're going to go to a retrospective system. So what's the plan for the department to address that issue for providers who are going to experience cash flow issues? I've talked to several other providers in some other states where they've gone through this same transition, and there have been numerous cases where providers have to borrow money to bridge the gap when we first started this system. And in other cases, it has caused providers to essentially have to close their doors. Now, there are also a lot of providers that were very successful in being able to do that. So I'm not want to point out that it's all bad, but those are all things that need to be considered as we move forward with this system. There's also this whole issue about having two different systems in terms of reimbursement. Providers can choose to stay with the ban system, provider can choose to continue with direct billing. I don't know if that's a feasible thing to do. I'm not aware of that being done in other states. Quite frankly, I think that would be a very difficult thing to do if we were to go in that direction to have two separate systems. And the other thing that we kind of want to know about is how are the capital needs going to be addressed? Right now, DDSN provides money for those things. Does the ban rates or the fee-for-service rates that we're going to potentially get allow us to save the money to be able to address capital needs? Again, we don't know that answer. The other question I have, are we, as far as providers go, are we then going to be required to continue to be financial managers? Because if you're doing direct billing, we're not going to be responsible for billing for other providers, for other systems. Personally, I would welcome that because I don't want to be a financial manager because the risks are, like I said, pretty great right now in terms of managing money for other organizations that may or may not follow some of the rules that need to follow. I think the biggest thing for us and our board is, while there's been a lot of talk about fee-for-service model as being a good alternative, there's very little being talked about in terms of what the details are. And we would encourage the commission as well as DDSN to help us understand what some of those details are so that we can make an informed choice to plan for whatever direction we're going to go to if we decide as a system that we want to move to a fee-for-service system. That's my comments.
Thank you so much. Pat, I've been watching you the whole time. I don't know what you're shaking your head on, but you've been shaking the whole time. Thank you very much. Linda Lee, please.
for giving me just a minute to get away from all these serious, crucial things that y'all are talking about today. I don't envy you figuring out where to get the money and extra help and all of that, but I wanted to share a few things that have been going on at Witten Center this month. October is our, it started out with a bang. We had fireworks show October 6th, shared it with the community and had a lot of community support. And I'm still hearing people talk about the grand finale. The group, Parents Club and the foundation hired this, paid for a group to come in and put on the show, and the residents, staff, and the community enjoyed it. Then we're going today to the state fair. So we, Parents Club chartered 255 passenger buses, and let's say Witten Center is really going to be recognized on Exceptional Citizens Day at the fair. This is something we do every year.
Y'all taking everybody?
We're taking, well, about 100 or so people. Some can't go, but we do fill the buses and take a few of the Witten Center vehicles also.
Wonderful.
And they have a great time. That's something. They come back with all their little prizes and things to hang around the room. We also, Parents Club is having Employee Appreciation Day on Friday, October 27th. We'll be there all day. And any of y'all that would like to come, you're invited. We are hiring a catering vendor this year to help us with the appreciation dinner, because our Parents Clubs, our members are getting a little older, and we thought this might help and be something that they would enjoy. We're also having a motorcycle ride. Our 28th annual Bub Lawless bike ride will be Sunday, October 29th, and they meet on the square in Clinton at noon. We have band, we have vendors, food, and they ride through campus at 2:30 on that afternoon. So anyone that would like to do that, you're invited. The residents get out and love the motor. My daughter just claps when the motorcycles come by, and they give a little extra rev when they go by hers so she can rock her wheelchair. And then, of course, we're having Halloween activities in the month, the campus-wide party. So I just wanted you to hear some good things.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Evelyn, is Evelyn here?
I'm Evelyn Finnegan from Child Development. Is that who you're calling?
Yes, ma'am.
I can speak from back here because we have a representative that's going to speak for us.
Oh, okay.
But I also want to say that my granddaughter has been in 2 homes in the state of South Carolina, Bedford and Midland. And she came to Tri Development because at the time they were planning to close Babcock. And I just want to praise Mr. Courtney, all the staff at Tri Development. This is a high quality place for them. And I just can't say enough about them. And I just want to say, why, ask a question, why would you close a place like Tri Development when there are other places in the state that are not of that quality? And that's all I have to say. And we have another representative back here.
The lady in the pretty red shirt. Thank you. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Joanne Berg, and I am the mother of a 44-year-old daughter who resides there. Before I start, I'd like to kind of pass these around. I think so often, you know, you forget about the people, and I think if you see pictures of our family members, that you will understand where our hearts are today. And there's several families members there. I represent about 9 people that came on a van this morning from Aiken. We have just been informed over the weekend about the closing of the ICFs for our children. And of course, we're very concerned, and we just felt like we had to share with you, and I'm sharing with you from my heart. This was basically about my daughter, but my daughter is just a representative of 31 others, daughters and sons, brothers, sisters, that this applies to. So when I refer to my daughter, just multiply that by 31 people, okay? Because I didn't have time to reformat it when I found out I was going to be the speaker. And I thank you for hearing my voice, because I am her voice. She's non-ambulatory, non-verbal. She was born with a congenital brain anomaly that caused her to have multiple developmental disabilities. She is wheelchair bound. She is has a feeding tube. Like I said, non-ambulatory, non-verbal. Has to have total assistance with all of her daily living activities. And there again, the ICF houses, of course, are the ones that address the more heavily involved clients. And so I speak for all others, the 31 others, that they have these same types of needs, a very high level of skilled care that is required on a day-to-day basis. In 2007, when we, as aging caregivers, aging parents, were no longer able to keep our daughter, we turned to the Tri-Development Center again. TDC has been part of our lives for 40 years. When she was 4 years old, she was in the first infant stimulation program through the Child Development Center in about 77, I believe. And we have been connected with DDSN and TDC since that time. And throughout those 40 years, we have been able to avail ourselves of many support programs that they have provided for us. So in 2007, we naturally turned to them, and she was placed in an ICF in DuPont Center. She does require a very high level of skilled care, as do all of our brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. She transitioned there very well, and as all of the 32 people who live in these homes would say, if they could voice it, that ICF became their new home. And that ICF, the people in their homes, the 8 people in each house, the 4 homes, they became their family. And that's the way I feel about my little Emily, that DuPont 2 is her new home and her new family. We have been very, very satisfied and pleased with the level of care that she received at TDC. I cannot give enough praise, and I'm sure that I've voiced the opinions of the other parents that are here, that TDC is an excellent provider of care. Not only do they provide skilled professional care, but they provide compassionate, loving, nurturing care too. And every night when my husband and I go to bed, we go to bed rest assured that our Emily has got a good home. And that's just so important. Let me see, I'm trying to kind of rephrase all of this. Every day, the well-trained staff at TDC is required to give long, tedious hours, carrying out difficult, often unpleasant, very challenging tasks, but they do it with gentleness and a total sense of compassion and concern and well-being for all of the ladies that are there and the gentlemen that are there. Also, just another side, many of these ladies and gentlemen are getting up in age themselves as well.
Many of them, unfortunately, have no family. TDC and their home in the ICF is their home and is their family. And I just cannot stress that enough, and how catastrophic and just how catastrophic it would be for them for their homes to be closed because of lack of proper funding to keep that level of care that they need up. It would just be very catastrophic for them as well as us, the family that are still here. So I would just ask you to please, don't get absorbed in, flow charts and pie charts and columns of figures and everything, but think about the impact that it would have on these people for these beautiful homes to close. And I just implore you and really just beg you to please find some money to keep those homes open.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, do I have any commissioners update? Well, I have one. I should have brought pictures, but I didn't because I thought of somebody else I wouldn't say. But I've been to the Coastal Center twice in the last 2 weeks. And first was for Fun Day, which was tons of fun. I had a great time. And then I'm just always so impressed at how well they've done. Then, also while I was there, they still had their hurricane shutters up. They say they work, but they didn't. They're just these things that go on the outside. But it was kind of, it was neat to see. Unfortunately, I said, down the road, don't y'all need some better things? He said, that would be really nice. So, and then I had a day kind of just spent at the Coastal Center. So I just want to say I am so impressed with what a wonderful job we did. So that's all. All right, Beverly.
Okay. Part of our director's report, again, just to remind everyone that DDSN is still in the middle of House legislative oversight process. We have now had 2 meetings. One was September 18th, and then we also had one on October 10th. We had a long list of items to get through, and I think everyone, including the committee members, didn't think we were going to get through it in one meeting, and we didn't. And so the next meetings, to make sure everybody has it on their calendar, the next one is Tuesday, October 24th. It will also be in the block building, but for those of you that came to the previous ones, it is in a different room. It is in room 321. And then the next meeting after that is November 6th, which is a Monday. That meeting is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it is also in the block building, room 427. So those are open to the public. I believe that Chairman Ravenel will be speaking at one of those, the 24th most likely.
Yeah.
So just make sure everyone is aware. We are continuing with TheraP implementation. 2 kind of big benchmarks that are coming up. First of which is the shared plan goes live on Monday, October 30th. DDSN held a training blitz last week with regards to that, multiple sessions across multiple places in the state. We have held webinars every day this week, 4 hours worth, for Q&A for providers to make sure that everybody's ready to go. There are also 3 more webinars scheduled for next week. Again, just Q&A sessions, trying not to make people drive, to make sure that everything's ready to go. And access is already available to providers in the test environment currently. So the go live date is Monday the 30th. Another piece that's ongoing with TheraP is stuff that the commission has previously discussed with regards to focusing how we track critical incidents and we're truly looking at critical incidents and have a different vehicle to look at more operational and routine medical. And so that goes live November 1st, and a module in TheraP called the General Event Record, GER for short. And so that goes live, but DDSN will not start
monitoring or looking at that until January 1st. So the providers have a couple months to get their feet wet and figure out, make sure that that process is going smoothly. Again, had training, multiple, I think over 30 individual training sessions with individual providers. There's also a webinar version of the training center, of the training module that you can go online and view the video. And we've held multiple webinars with regards to that from a Q&A point of view. So that's two pretty big benchmarks as far as the THERAP implementation. I believe Chairman Ravenel kind of referred to Pat Maley earlier. We are at the tail end of what I would call phase one with regards to funding reviews. If you will recall, back in June, staff recommended, the commission approved to go forward and look at different funding opportunities because the band system has its current limitations. But one of the things in moving forward that we wanted to know is what pieces, parts of the band are working well right now, what pieces, parts aren't working well, what potentially is being instructed to us from outside entities, either being federal, CMS, or state, DHHS, and looking at what a new funding model. And so Pat Maley has taken the lead on that. He's interviewed a bunch of other states as far as what their funding system looks like and how it's organized. Interviewed over a dozen DDSN providers to get their, a little bit more of a conversation with more detail. And then also used the feedback from those two mechanisms to do a fairly detailed survey of all providers in the DDSN system. That survey, it was extended a little bit based on request of providers to have a little bit more time. That closed yesterday. And so we are in the very tail end of that. I believe I mentioned this to commissioners in an email, but I would strongly suggest that you guys schedule a work session so that you can hear what was found with regards to that process, so that you have the information and moving forward and what components of the new funding system need to look like. And then again, there are other, not just what's working well and not working well within our current system, but pressures and requirements from external that we've got to take into account in whatever the new system looks like. It marries very well with what Dr. Bernard said in his public comments about we have to have a lot of details moving forward that quite frankly we don't have yet. And so looking at that, and then kind of leading into the first agenda item, wanted to make sure that families in the room of Tri-Development Center, I heard a lot of people say the word closing. That was never anyone's intention. I feel comfortable saying that was not Tri-Development Center's intention, and it's definitely not DDSN's. Tri-Development, and we've got an agenda agenda item that we're going to be looking at that, but our priority as an agency is to figure out how we can bridge so that Tri-Development Center can continue to operate this home, but closing was never an option. In the past, we have had providers that have raised their hand and said for a specific situation or a specific address, we can no longer operate this home. Generally speaking, it's not that it's closed. Our plan A, our priority is to figure out how Tri-Development Center can continue to be the operating entity of that home. But if plan A does not work, plan B would be other providers that we've already reached out to other providers. There are more than one that are interested. And so the families would have the option and the choice to determine and interview what other provider you would like to operate that home. But closing and you being required to move your loved ones was never on the table. I don't think it was on the table from Tri-Development Center. It surely wasn't on the table from DDSN. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that that is not under consideration right now. And so we did meet with Tri-Development Center yesterday and had some, what I think, pretty healthy conversations and looking at options of moving forward. But I don't want to foreshadow too much into our first agenda item, but I did want to make sure that I clarified that because obviously if I was in your spot and I was thinking that the option of closing, that would be very, very concerning, even more concerning. So I just wanted to make sure that I was real clear on that. No one is considering that at all, but we do need to figure out with Tri-Development Center indicating that they don't feel like they can operate it. What can we do to make that continue and happen for families? So we are very sensitive to that. So
thank you very much. Tom, okay, we're going to go into the business part. You first. Go ahead with the Tri-Development Center ICF.
Okay, like Sammy said, we had a good meeting yesterday with Ralph and Heather and Karen from Tri Development. Positive steps were agreed upon with several steps moving forward into the next several weeks. We agreed on exploring several different alternatives and to try to understand the financial position that Tri Development is in, not only with their ICS, but with their other programs that they operate as well. Our goal, like Dr. Sammy said, is to maintain the running of those 4 ICS by Tri Development. So that is our goal, and that's what we're shooting for. We discussed how we got here, why this confusion and why this frustration and uncertainty, like Ms. Bird had mentioned from her standpoint. There's different opinions on that, so, but we're here where we are. We're trying to move forward, trying to be positive, trying to figure out a way for Tri Development to continue to operate those 4 facilities. We think there's several things that can be done to stabilize their financial position and get things back in order. We looked at their both 16 and 17 financials. There's a lot of questions on how some of the entries were made. We need more understanding of those events in the financial statements for 16 and 17. We'll be getting more information, be more diving into it over the next several weeks. I think as we move forward, we'll be able to make better decisions on what we need to do to try to stabilize those 4 houses. There's several meetings scheduled for the next several weeks. One, a site visit that Mr. Dell and his state district director is going to go and meet with the staff and review some of the ICF operations down there and the day program operations as well. We have another meeting scheduled the 1st of November to get back together to discuss some of the things we talked about yesterday, get more information, hear what came out of the site visit, and then move forward on those decision points. I think we can find a path. I think from Ralph's standpoint and from Tri Development standpoint, I think we can get there. We'll see where we go as we move down this path. We know it needs to be corrected here soon. We understand the urgency of that, and we're putting our efforts there to make this happen as soon as we can, as soon as we get all the information we need and all the facts on the table to understand the financial position of Tri Development. We do know that the ICFs have been a problem, and we know it's statewide. We've been communicating that for several years now. We've got it in the budget priorities of our agency for the last several years. We need some influx of new money, try to help us stabilize that particular band payment that we have for ICFs. We've asked for $1.5 million. We continue to ask that in coming up with this current budget process. For Tri Development, that has been an issue. Their ICFs have been a loser program. They have other winners in their system. They also had some major financial losses in 17 and other programs as well. That's what we're trying to understand, to try to understand how that impacted the total operation of Tri Development. So I believe we can get there. I think both teams from DDSN and from Tri Development have that positive commitment to try to figure this thing out and move forward and come up with solutions to maintain the operation of these 4 ICFs under Tri Development's management and operation.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
I do. Are they one of the ban rates? You know, when you sent that information out to us about the ban rates, there were some where there wasn't a lot of administrative costs coming out, but there were some that were like 28%. Which ban rate are they? Are they
for the administrative percentage?
Yeah, I mean, are they one of the ones that we're taking more administrative costs from, or are they the ones that have the minimum administrative costs?
That's the information we gave on the ICFs now as it relates to those 32 people and those 32 beds.
Yeah.
But we gave statewide,
Yeah.
and that's the very low percentages of 3%, 4%. That's the ICFs by the time you take into account outliers and whatnot. Again, that's statewide, not specific for those 32 beds.
We also give a
One
sheet.
ban rate of
Correct.
28%.
And we had broken down between 5 million and lower, and 5 million to 50 million, 15 million and over. I'm not sure, I don't remember where tribal development falls into that. I mean, they're,
Are they, I'm just wondering, are they one of those that's having a harder time because they're in that one where we're taking 28%?
But we don't for ICFs, that's what we went on the other.
yeah, we're not taking 28%.
There were bands, there were different bands. Yeah.
Oh, you talking the band Bs, I mean band Gs and band H and Rs.
Yeah.
They have all band H's, all 32 beds are band H's. There's no band Rs or band Gs, and they're 32 beds. So they would be more in line with the lower percentage.
Okay, so that's not, okay. So what is, do you know what it would cost to make them whole? Do they have an idea of?
Yeah, their financials show that they ran about $600,000, $650,000 loss. It was a little bit less in 17 and 16. So they have a loss of about 650,000, let's say.
In those 4 houses in 1 year?
1 year.
But you have to balance that. They also operate CRCFs. Their gain in the CRCFs was what?
350,000.
Yeah, so it's still a hole. It's just not as deep a hole as.
So there's still $350,000.
300.
Correct.
Between the ICFs and the CRCFs.
Well, we need to keep those two separated. I don't think that they're the same.
So, I mean, there were previously ICFs that we allowed to convert because of health issues of the consumers and the financial position for those facilities too. So they do help balance some of the ICF losses. That's how we.
And this did not, no triggers were pulled, but a couple of years ago, there was a lot of conversation and some work sessions about when the ICFs were really starting to be talked about a lot. The agency talked about and decided not to go with this, and the commission was included in this, with you can balance CRCFs with ICFs. There's money to be had in CRCFs. Most providers are making money off CRCFs, and most providers are losing money on ICFs. So internally, you could balance it. The agency decided not to go down that route at that time, and then add it to the budget request and request new money for ICFs because not all providers operate both. And so while as a system, it might be revenue neutral, for an individual provider, there would be a lot of losers that would lose money in their CRCFs that they were using to balance elsewhere. And if you operated an ICF, you would gain money. But that was discussed about 2 years ago, and the agency decided not to go forward with that because of the winners and losers on an individual provider basis. But system-wide, it could be revenue neutral. And again, the agency went with adding it to the budget request and requesting new funds for that. So that's why the CRCFs and the ICFs are tied from a systems perspective, because most of our CRCFs at one point used to be an ICF.
And to add on what you said, Dr. Singh, there are some ICFs that are making a little bit of money. There are not all 490 beds that we have in community ICFs are losing for is the band payment to them versus what they're expending. So there are some profits being made in ICF programs.
But statewide, it's
statewide,
upside down.
some.
Statewide, we need a rate adjustment. No one's saying you need to get a
So
contract.
when you approach these other providers about taking over the operation, they think they cannot operate at a loss of $600,000, or have you tied the ICS with the CRCS? Are you attempting to do that?
No. We're hoping, and we talked in general terms yesterday, but our goal right now is for tribal development to maintain these 4 houses.
Right.
We don't want to go chasing rabbits right now. We want to concentrate on that goal, and we think we can get there.
But you said you had 2 people lined up.
Well, we made some conversations,
Yeah, we've had,
but we haven't got down to
yeah, we
any
have to have
details.
some conversations in case Plan A doesn't.
Right. But it just amazes me that a provider would come in knowing they could lose $650,000 a year.
I don't know that all providers would lose that. That's it. Right.
What's the worst case scenario for our consumers in these 4 houses? Give me the worst case scenario.
The new provider would step in.
Okay. Refresh my memory, about 10, 12 years ago, did we not at Babcock do this same thing?
Yes.
Did we find providers for those? I don't know if they're ICRs or what.
They're a mixture of
Okay, so
ICFs.
they were bleeders, they were losers, and we just said, we're not doing this anymore. Did You bring in other providers for those?
Yes.
Did any of those prop houses close?
No, sir.
Did you have busloads of people come to DDSN saying that they've been told that the houses were gonna close?
Not at that time.
No. Did we ever, I'm asking my executive director, did we ever tell people that their loved ones were gonna be put on the street?
No.
The reality is that's not gonna happen. And we're gonna take care of these consumers.
That's our goal.
And I just want to make sure everybody knows what the worst case scenario is. It's a different provider. Nobody wants that to happen if we can't help it.
Right.
But we'll do everything we can to keep trial development in there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments? No, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you use it back? Talk about the waiting list reduction action.
Good morning. We are in tab 3, and as is typical, most of these reports were provided to you ahead of time, so I'll be here for questions. I do want to just highlight the commission advisement added to the front of your section, which gives an update on some of the activities that we've been working on with DHHS to improve the timeliness of waiver enrollment. In order to reduce waiting lists, you have to get people enrolled in waivers, and we need that process to work efficiently. So that's documentation advising you of that effort.
Okay, Ms. Beck, I'm sorry. Can I get someone to check the microphone, or maybe move it up? I'm getting signs from the back of the room that they can't hear.
Can y'all hear it now?
Is it better now? It's on low. It's pretty low.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you cut it up?
Can you turn it up a little bit? Turn the volume.
Sorry.
There's a gentleman behind you.
Oh, you need.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Beck?
Turn it off. Piece of cake.
Were there any questions? If not louder. I can just talk really loud.
Talk really, really loud.
Yeah, talk really
Talk loud.
Were there any questions that I could answer for you?
Thank you very much. Since you're right there, why don't you talk about the funding allotment between ID and RD waivers?
Sure. In tab 4, we've provided a briefing on recommendation for commission approval. I won't belabor the point by reading that to you. I hope it's very clear that we, as you recall back a few months ago, the commission approved, I think we called it option 4, which was our balancing of funding and the allotment of slots between CS and ID to try to get the community sports waiver and RD waiver kind of working together. So we've reached the closure of option 4, which was at 600 slots, and so we're asking for these recommendations from staff to be approved by commission. If you'd like me to review them with you or discuss them, I'd be glad to do so.
Anybody have any questions? Do I have a motion?
How do we, we're moving it back the other direction. Okay, so did we ever reach our cap? Where's the cap situation?
So I think the question was if we reached the cap for the total possible number of people enrolled in the community supports waiver?
No, in the IDRD.
In IDRD, no, we're not at that cap.
Okay, so and that's no longer an issue because we've been.
It's been raised because of the waiver renewal, the actual total possible enrolled based on funding, that's not been reached yet, but that was extended and the renewal, when that renewal was passed.
Okay, but at some point last year, we had to consider when we were.
Yes.
So now we're putting more money back into the IDRD.
Yes.
And that's where more residential comes from.
Correct.
And how many more slots?
How many
more, how are we doing the money? Because I didn't understand this.
Oh, sure. So
2-in-1 conversion for every 3 vacant community support slots.
Yes. As you recall, we had, and I'll try to speak as loud as I can. I'm sorry.
Pull it up with your hand. There you go.
I don't think I can get it. It's I can touch it and it's not any louder. It makes us sound when I touch it. I apologize. Sorry.
Throw that voice.
I don't even know where I was. What was I talking about?
I'm just curious in how that three slot to
Yeah.
one ratio
Yeah.
is gonna translate into about how many slots?
That's not really how it works. As the vacancies come open, and y'all help me if I need it, but as the vacancies come open, so if a slot's allotted to you, let's say, and you decline, then that slot kind of comes back into the flow, and then this is the scheme we're asking for.
But you're growing that IDRD slot.
We're
Yeah.
swapping.
Yeah,
We're swapping.
let me back up for a second.
Yeah.
What you guys approved back in June was for the funding associated with 600 slots
Yes.
to be moved from the community sports waiver to the IDRD waiver. That has already been done, the funding and those 600, right, and it's all at home, not residential, it's all at home. And so if you will also recall, 2 years ago, we rolled out 750 slots in the community supports waiver over the funded amount, because we had such a high declination and it took, there's just so much movement, so we could get more people enrolled quicker. And we said at some point, we're gonna have to pull those back. So that 600 has already been reallocated to the community, to the IDRD. We're not recommending reallocating anymore at this point. Leave them as they come open, move with that churn. However, we are now approaching closer that 750 over enrollment that we don't have money to pay for. And so we've got to start kind of dialing that back a little bit in the community sports waiver. So what we're recommending is even within the leave the two pots, not moving stuff around anymore, but within the community sports, that gap between what we've over enrolled and what we actually have money for is getting much less. And so for every 3 slots, we want to roll out 2 of them, keep back 1 of them, so we don't stop movement of the community sports. We don't all of a sudden want to have 3 months that nobody gets any slots, but we can start narrowing the gap between what we over allotted and what we actually have funded capacity for. So that's
You feel like this is gonna best meet the needs of the resources.
without having like no movement. I just don't want to have
And
no
no
movement.
capacity issue.
Correct.
With this one. I move we adopt it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Against? All right, thank you very much. Beverly.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read this, but I want to acknowledge that Governor McMaster's has issued Disability Employment Awareness Month for this month, and in your folders under tab 5 and in the visitors packet, you have a copy of that proclamation. We are very happy and proud that our governor continues to support this effort. But with this, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Susan Davis, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the Employment First initiatives. And for those of you that got here ahead of the meeting, you saw some lovely videos that were playing that focused on employment. And I think Ms. Davis is going to talk about that.
And I'll be quick. Good morning. I'm thankful to be here and I'm delighted to be focusing on employment. Personally, that's my passion, and I'm thrilled to be working with SCDDSN, who has a commitment to employment first for individuals. I second the fact that I'm thankful that the governor has proclaimed this month as Disability Employment Awareness Month. CDSN, as you know, believes that every individual should be considering employment as the first and preferred option for working age adults. And I think I personally am excited about employment because I realize that for many of us, it's the way we make a real contribution. And we feel like we're connected and we get to find a sense of purpose. Obviously, financial gains are a part of it. Most of the individuals that we serve have limited resources. And by working and combining the benefits that they have, they literally make more money coming into their household, which for many of us opens up doors in terms of what we can do with our lives. The third thing is that if you think about, and all of us think about, some of our closest relationships, many of us have made those relationships in the workplace. Our closest friends are connected to experiences we've had. So I'm passionate about employment and I'm passionate about all the wonderful providers that we have that are making employment a successful part of individual clubs. Just to give you just a little bit of perspective about employment, because there's a big emphasis on employment, and I know that we look about how are we going to be successful in making this happen here in South Carolina. I'm sure that you're aware. If you're not, this will be helpful for you to know, because you're pretty important people, that South Carolina vocational rehab is what is considered by the federal government to be the state designated unit, which I actually had never heard that term. But what it really means for us is that they are by law the folks that are given the biggest chunk of money for employment. It's earmarked for employment, and their mission is to prepare and assist eligible South Carolinians with disabilities to achieve and maintain competitive employment. Just in terms of a national perspective, it'd be helpful for you to know that in 48 states, the vocational rehab doesn't personally do that within their four walls. They contract with the provider agencies in their state, because their provider agencies are generally the people that have the relationships with the individuals to help them secure employment. In South Carolina, though, vocational rehab does it a little differently, and they request that we refer people to them to secure the employment. And then our piece in the puzzle is providing those ongoing supports, because most of the time, individuals that get a new job need some sort of ongoing support. So just wanted to let you know how that's going for us, because we're trying to collaborate quite a bit with the agency. That as of last year, the providers for DDSN actually increased individual employment opportunities for people to the tune of 24.5%. So just in 1 year's time, 24.5% increase over the number of people that we were serving the year before. We have also increased by 300 and almost 40% the amount of referrals that case managers have made to vocational rehab for jobs for people. So when VR finds those people jobs, we have thankfully put into place by the DDSN folks is the ongoing follow-along support. So if somebody is in our system on a waiting list and we don't have the resources to find them a job, but they go to VR and they get that job and they love that job, they bump all the way to the front of the line and we provide them with those ongoing supports so they don't lose that job. We are very committed to their success, and we don't want their hearts to be broken because they finally get to wear that uniform and they finally get that paycheck, and then they become our responsibility and they don't get to keep the job because we're not there to provide that support. So that's exciting. The other thing is, if you saw the video about the gentleman that was getting into the van, he's actually a collaboration between DDSN and VR in terms of modifying his vehicle so he can do what? Maintain his job. So there's some really exciting things that are happening. And as our video said, having a job means it's going to be a good day. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, this is one of my goals, and I'm hoping that it's the goal for the direct care staff wages to go up. This year, we've asked the legislature to give us a raise to $12 an hour, and my goal is by 2020, 2020, we will be paying our direct care staff $15 an hour. So I just wanted to discuss this with y'all and see if I can get a motion that it would be our goal for just doing that. Anybody have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, so where did he go?
Well, we'll have a motion then. Then y'all got the most talkative people in the world. Can't get a word out of y'all edgewise. Come on.
we got an email from somebody about, a concern was that they would be making more than some of the, like the EI director and all that.
Well, I'm not gonna be worried about that in 2020. That time the EI director is gonna be up there also.
Yeah.
So I think we should just push for the people who are on the bottom line, you know, I call them the ones that, really are the backbone of our industry. If you go to, I guess, because I was at the Coastal Center on Tuesday, and it's just amazing the hard work they do. So it is.
I think there would be some concern about salary compression within the different positions. Could you kind of add that to your goal that,
one of you will have to make a motion. I can't make it.
you would like to see direct care professionals at $15 an hour by 2020, and any adjustments in other positions also would be included or taken into account in that process.
Okay. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Further discussion?
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't believe this commission is in the goal-setting business. It's way beyond our scope of governance. So I will not take part in that vote or that conversation.
Okay.
And I've had concern along those lines as well as to if this is not addressed as needed. I mean, we've addressed these issues in the past, but in terms of setting these long-term goals, not knowing what.
Well, I think my whole purpose was that I want the legislature and everybody else to know that we are really trying to take care of the people who need it the most, especially since we're giving raises to all of our administrative staff. So I think we need to, I want them to know that this is my goal. And I get this because I have a brother who's at the Coastal Center, and I deal with it weekly because I go there weekly. So I didn't realize this was going to be on the agenda. It was on the agenda, so I definitely said, oh, I thought we put it on the agenda. I said, okay, that's great. It is a goal of mine, and this is something I'd like to see done. So either vote it up or down.
Could we have a little more discussion?
Sure, discuss it.
It's great to have a personal goal as a commission, I guess, but don't we, in a way, or even directly deal with this when we approve a spending plan and all of the other activities we already go through? Isn't it sort of tacit that we want these increases in our other activities?
I think we have had a strategic plan and we've had the process. One of the things we never have gotten to is turning that into a working document and the performance matrix that I asked for time and time again and forgot. But, you know, if you have, I think the opposite. I mean, I think that we do need to set goals. And I think that everybody needs to know what our priorities are. And we said in our strategic planning process, it was going to be critical incidents and responding to emergencies. It was going to be waiting lists, and it was going to be direct care worker salary. And then it got to direct care worker salaries became more critical last year. And we did get some relief, but we have to keep pushing because you're right. We have no driver in the vehicle without those direct care workers. They are the absolute essence of what we do. We can't function without them. And we have to stay competitive in that area. And, you know, so I agree with you that we need to make that a priority. And there's nothing wrong with us setting goals. I think that is a real positive thing. And we can go back and do a more formal version of that in the strategic planning. But, you know, I think one of our problems with this agency is we're not ahead of things. We're always on the back side of it, trying to fix. And I think we need to do more goal setting and not less, if anything.
All right. Y'all want to take a vote? Y'all, I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
Well, you have to do something because you've got a motion.
I've got a motion.
I can withdraw the motion. The discussion has gone in a direction that I don't know that it's
Well,
the time.
one of the reasons that I sent out to everybody goals is because we haven't done a strategic plan. We hadn't done it in a while. It's been over 2 years that we've had any discussion on it. And I just felt like we kind of dropped the ball, and if we didn't.
Wait, how long ago when we sat here?
It's been 2 years.
And did the sheets of paper?
That's this year.
I don't think so. I believe I was here.
Yeah. I went back and looked.
You weren't here at the beginning of the
You were at the beginning, but you were at the.
Yeah, the process probably began about 2 years.
It began because
About 2.5.
it began about 2.5 years, but then we hadn't done anything with it for not very good time.
But, you know, if we need to take a look at that, then maybe that.
Yeah, maybe that would be a great thing to look at our strategic plan.
That's where it should be.
That's the discussion we need to be having, I think, is if we would revisit the strategic plan, then that's where that.
Clearly, we all want our direct care workers to make more money.
Absolutely.
It's not even a question. This is a formality versus what the substance of the conversation is.
But the process about how we.
Should be in the strategic.
But maybe we go back, okay? Do you want to?
I can fully support that.
Okay. Well, then you want to make a motion that we go back to do something about our
Now,
strategic plan?
I'm in his motion.
I can do that.
All right, good.
We'll make the motion that we would like to revisit the strategic plan with the salary issue in mind, or simply, we just leave this more generic. Just revisit and consider the strategic plan in light of current events and conditions.
Right. Do I have any more discussion? Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, yeah. So I don't have to say against, right? Okay. Great, thank you very much. All right, Beverly, we're going to discuss fingerprint background.
And this is on the agenda, Commissioner Danielson specifically requested that it be on the agenda last month. So for your conversation in between last month's commission meeting and this commission meeting, DDSN, and I want to give Andal the credit, has reached out to other state agencies to figure out what they are doing, particularly state agencies that serve by a broad stroke definition any version of vulnerable folks. And so while we haven't heard back from everyone, and this chart could get updated over time, we heard back from some of the ones that I think were the most similar to DSS, Department of Mental Health, DHHS, and then LLR, which keep in mind, LLR would only be dealing with those that are licensed, and DHEC, which we have not heard back from, would deal with non-licensed, but going in and looking at those certifications of different type of populations. And so most state agencies aren't requiring, in our state currently aren't requiring fingerprint background checks. DHHS doesn't require it. Most of their contracted employees. There are some exceptions, DSS being a notable one because of children. And so the higher requirements for children. But as far as staff doesn't have a recommendation, we also gave you the copy of the law as it currently exists, which is 44-7-2910. But I understand that the body wanted to discuss this further, so we were trying to give you a little bit more information for what other folks in our state do. Mr. Danielson, I'm looking at you. Is your request?
Did you, DSS obviously goes to the nth degree. How long does it take DSS, maybe Ann can answer these questions if you have the specific, how long does it take DSS to turn over their employee from application to in the field?
They typically receive the results of the fingerprint background check within 10 days to 3 weeks from the time the employee is fingerprinted.
How does that compare to ours?
It seems to take us maybe a week longer.
Okay, what's the comparable, the DSS people, are they in the $10 per hour range?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, because they would have to do foster parents, which is more of a stipend type thing. It's not an hourly rate. Their case managers all would have to be done, and that's a different, so I mean, if you're
My
kind of.
question driving towards, can those people wait 2 or 3 weeks to take a job versus some of the people that we're trying to hire and keep from working as a Walmart greeter, for lack of a better term? Difference?
Yeah, I think you're gonna have an DSS are not hourly employees, they're professionals.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the answer to my question. They're hard paid, they can wait.
Have y'all ever heard of biometrics?
Sell them every day.
Well, this is a lot of different biometrics, but there's a company and all EMS workers throughout South Carolina go through biometrics for their fingerprint background checks. It takes 2 or 3 days. It costs $37, which is cheaper than the overtime that you're gonna pay while you're waiting on somebody to go through a finger background check. But I would think that if the state has a deal, and I turned off this application that they use, there are biometrics places all over South Carolina where you can walk in. You can do a lot of this online to get ready to do your background check. There's $37 for every EMS worker in the state. I'm not clear on why EMS workers have to have this done like they do. So why don't we go to them and try to negotiate our best deal? Because if they're doing it in a few days, and that's their claim for EMS workers, then I think that's what we need to try to do. Getting back to what you said last month, Bill, which is maybe we need to catch ourselves up a little bit with what else is going on in the industry. And it's going on more than an industry, it's EMS workers. There's another way to do this without eliminating that. It is a risk if you eliminate it. And I don't know that we need to in this day of technology and with what's available to us at $37. You know, I think that's probably a.
Were you referring, I'm making sure I understood, were you referring to EMS, which are county-based, or were you referring to DSS or both?
EMS, which is county-based and technical college-based. Everybody that's trained as an EMS worker.
I'm looking at Ann because I think this is, y'all were talking about last month, this is one of those where we're told we have to do it a certain way because we're a state agency as opposed to a county and private have options that we don't currently have as a state agency. Am I correct?
I cannot speak to procurement issues. I do know that there is one entity that has been awarded a contract in the state of South Carolina to handle all fingerprint background checks for health licensing agencies. And we are grouped into that category. Well, I don't know why it was set up for one vendor. I don't know what the particulars are in terms of trying to work around that. I just know I have been told whenever I have asked if there is another way to do this to try to streamline the results, I've been told no.
Well, county boards are not state agencies. So we're not talking about the same thing. I think what we need to do is negotiate ourselves a deal with this company if we can and try to get our fingerprint background checks at $37 or less. Just explore with that company. I mean, on behalf of the providers in the state, because I don't want to see us eliminate this step for this population if there's another way to do it. But we have to look for that other way.
Sure.
Well, and Commissioner Thompson, you're saying eliminate. It's not required now. This will be an additional requirement across the board. Fingerprints at a national level are not what's required now. So you're using the word eliminate. That's not accurate. It's not being done
Well,
now.
there's something in the legislative committee that you asked us to look at in regard to fingerprint background checks and eliminate, and we decided not to. What was that?
That was with regards to right now, the verbiage of which we and the providers are adhering to is pre-employment. There was a conversation about having that be pre-contact with vulnerable folks so that new hires could go and sit in a new employee orientation for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, start getting their training before they have exposure to vulnerable adults, because right now, or children, whatever the case may be, right now it says pre-employment, so they can't even go sit in a classroom for two weeks, and the providers vast majority said they would like that flexibility. If an individual provider still says, hey, I'm more comfortable, I really don't want them starting here until I get the background checks, they would still have that option. But right now, they don't have that option. So that's what staff recommended, and then the conversation went a bunch of different places.
Well, the committee looked at that and said no.
Yeah, that's
So-
different from what this is.
Well, not really. I mean, we need to do the criminal background check, and I'm trying to tell you other ways you can do it faster and it doesn't cost that much. So let's just get with it, you know, and explore a little bit.
Yeah, we'll go back and have
If we're going to
conversations.
put it on the agenda every month, then let's have something to talk about when we get here, because this report that was done doesn't make any sense. It says that DMH, does your agency require fingerprint-based background check? DMH, no, but it does.
No,
If
they
it's
don't.
not a resident for the past 12 months.
Right, only in that scenario.
Well, in that scenario, is a yes, not a no. I'm just saying, it's 4 yeses and 3 nos, and then we go over here to this next page, and it says, you know, does your agency extend an offer of employment prior to receiving the result? And it says no, and over here it says it's not requiring it. So, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, I just think we ought to start working the problem a little bit and try to see what our options are in getting criminal background checks faster.
We, again, like Ms. Dalton said, we've asked if we have, as a state agency, the option of doing something different. We were told no. We can go back and have further conversations. We can ask the question again to make sure that we're interpreting things correctly. Thus far, we've been told no. We cannot go with a vendor like you're suggesting. However, we will ask the question
You
again.
might not can as a state agency, but you might can as a county provider.
Go ahead, Amy.
The provider agencies are working through a license that is issued by the state of South Carolina through DDSN, and that is the reason why I've been told they cannot go through another vendor.
Well, I just think we need to not accept that at this.
More government frustration.
Okay, any more discussion on this?
Thanks for having it on the agenda.
Okay. All right, Tom. Let's get through all of this quickly. Thank you.
Tab 7 in your package is the financial reports. There's 4 documents in there for your review. The first one is the cash balances in our 4 operating accounts, showing what revenue we brought in for the fiscal year through September, first quarter of the year. Shows our expenditures. Revenues right at $253 million that we brought in. Expenditures been right at $184 million. Balance, cash balance in those 4 operating accounts at the end of September is $169 million, going forward into the next sector of the fiscal year. So things are moving. Revenues are coming in, and we're meeting our obligations and all with our provider network and our regional centers and operating quality care that we operate throughout our system. The next spreadsheet is the SKIS report, September. It's the budget versus actual by major program areas. Basically shows the same thing, shows what was appropriated to us on July 1 of $747 million. And then what additional funds we've received since July 1, most of that's related to the generator grant funding from FEMA, and then the extra money we received for health insurance and retirement increases that the General Assembly passed on to us. And so we're now our appropriated authority budget for 2018 is $755 million. The next sheet is the spreadsheet related to this first quarter of operation for regional centers. It shows the overall account merging all 4 of the regional centers into one component, and shows that $68.9 million in personnel and operating dollars, and shows expenditures through the first quarter of $18.5 million. The percentage there is 29% of the budget that's been spent through September for personnel, and 23 on average for the operating. Reason personnel's up a little bit because we had 3 payrolls in September, so that's why that's tweaked up to 29%. We're really on target. Everything's moving appropriately. The regional center management teams are staying within their budget and meeting the needs of the individuals in their campus. And then the final sheet is a worksheet related to some discussion was brought up back in August at our work session about our admin cost, for department versus our total operational cost. This worksheet just kind of breaks out over the last 6 years, our percentages related to our true admin to the total expenditures of the department. Staying in the 1.5% range is where we've been. Last year, we were at 1.33% of our admin costs to our total operations for the department. Any questions on those 4 documents?
Any other questions? All right, great. Tom, you want to go on about the provider contract increase?
Yes, ma'am. I got 2 contract increases that are over the $200,000 limit related to consumers in need of services that have chosen Burton Center and Colleton as their provider of service. And so Burton Center, I'm asking for approval to approve $230,338 in new funding from them over their original budget that was approved back in June. And you see there, it's related to some beds that were unfunded, they were vacant, and then new people have come off the critical needs list and now in service through those beds that will be funded through these $230,000 in money that we're asking you to approve today. So basically, it's just recirculating those monies that were previously available to Burton Center. Someone else is now choosing to use those dollars and chosen Burton Center to as their residential provider, basically. And so we're asking for those monies to be approved for them to expand those beds into their residential services. The next one is Colleton, asking for $299,675 to be added to their original budget request that was approved back in June. This is related to new capacity where they have developed a new house in their area for Depop for people coming out of regional centers. That's 3 beds that someone from one of the regional centers has come and they placed into these new beds that have been opened up by Colleton, and then another SLP 2 bed that's for someone coming off the critical needs list into placement at their SLP2 program. So ask for your approval of those 2 requests.
Do you have any discussion? Motion? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, Tom, go on to the next one.
That's tab 9.
Generators.
Generators. This is the 3rd phase of our work with the FEMA generator grant that we received back in January, and we're in the 3rd phase of soliciting and bidding out these 4 additional generators and have capacity in these locations around the state. We have 1 more to go, and the 4th one will be next month or 2. We'll be bringing, probably in the first of the year, I guess, bringing that back to you for your approval. And that's related to Farmville, Bamberg, and Orangeburg that have a generator capacity at their day program site. So this request, the third phase of our 4-phase project, is for Chesco, where the Pageland Workshop, Lee County at the Gibbs Activity Center, Marion Dillon at their Marion Day Program Building, and Marlboro at their Marlboro Work Activity Facility in Bitsville. So each of these facilities will be getting a generator. You can see the type of generator will be getting natural gas or diesel. Alternates include control packages that will provide routine exercise and maintenance and record keeping for the generator. That's a requirement for the generator to be tested throughout the month and throughout the year, and records be maintained. Cost of each location will be shared by DDSN and through the FEMA money that we have been authorized to receive. DDSN is sub-recipient of these funds. 2 responsive bidders that you see in the package there. Low bidder has performed the work in the previous 2 phases that we've done, and so we feel very comfortable that this contractor can perform the work for us. The bids were taken on October 10th. Staff recommend that the contract be awarded for those 4 generators to DNB Electric Incorporated of West Columbia to include all 4 locations base bids and 4 alternates for a total of $558,762. Ask for your approval.
Any discussion?
Simple question. Hurricane comes through. We don't know where it's gonna hit. This is the remaining, we have one more phase of the generators.
On the current application.
On the current application. How many generators in total was that?
The 14. We got a second, I'm being interrupted, we got a second application in process with them for FEMA to fund additional 9 generators.
Can I ask one, is one of them coming, just because I know that's where the hurricane decided?
No, ma'am, they did not apply.
They did not apply.
In the original package, no.
Okay.
But go ahead, sir.
Okay, so that kind of drives to my question. We evacuate, as I've looked at our notes, we evacuated over 300 people when Irma came through. Correct? Right around 300 people, including employees. All right. When we evacuate people, are we evacuating all those people to generator sites?
That's what we're trying to do.
That's not my question. Okay. Are we evacuating all those people to generator sites?
Not all of them are going currently to places that have generators attached to them.
Okay, if we have and I know Coastal has done this a couple of times, a shelter in place order. We decide they're better off to have people shelter in place.
Yes.
Have we ever had people shelter in place without a generator available?
Not when you're evacuating.
Anytime there's been a shelter in place during evacuation, we've always had a generator.
During the evacuation.
Right.
Yeah, we would, if there was mandatory evacuation, we would tell them.
Not mandatory. This is when we decide to shelter in place. If we decide to have people shelter in place under any circumstances, is there a generator in place?
No.
I don't think we've ever had that scenario, if I'm understanding your question.
Okay.
If the hurricane is coming that way.
Right.
Right, because even with Coastal Center, we got permission to have them shelter in place.
Right, we had to go.
Yeah, we didn't just ignore the governor's.
We had to go overhead and.
Right, we had to get
do
permission.
that.
But it was coming that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the expected, you're not evacuating all the time.
And the evacuation sites, when somebody had to leave and cross over counties, they were going to a place that was not, at least projected, I don't know what the whole projection, but there was not projected to lose power. So they were going to a day program site where electricity was not an issue.
Right. Which most of the time, when they're evacuating, right?
Sometimes they do this.
Yeah, projections.
That's my issue, when we miss.
Right. Ask for your approval of that.
You'll have a
I'll make a motion.
Second? All those in favor? Okay, now the plan to provide generators at all day program locations.
Yes, ma'am. Tab 10 shows a map, a color map of the state, all 46 counties. It's colored, the green and blue and yellow are the good sites, good areas of the state that either we got capacity currently and this is related only to having generator capacity at large day program sites. There are other areas of the state that have residential generators on some of their residential, either a fixed generator or a switch where we can bring a mobile unit in and attach to that residential facility. But this is just related to day program sites. As you can see, we got 9 that are green, 4 that are blue, and 5 that are yellow. So that's about 18. That's 18 that in the near future will be having generators capacity at their large day sites. We still have 28 that are still not able to have generator capacity in when they're large day facilities. There are, like I mentioned previously when Commissioner Bannerson was talking, we have a second application in process now with FEMA for approval. I believe it was Joan, it was about $1.6 million, $1.4 million for these additional generators that we're asking FEMA to fund. We haven't heard back from them on those, but those are being Pickens, Anderson, Lawrence, Spartanburg, Cherokee, Newberry, Fairfield, and Williamsburg County. So there will be approximately 20 areas of the state, counties of the state that where a day program facility would not be available if we get that application approved by FEMA in the next few weeks or months. On the second page, you can see there, you see a list of providers that have residential facilities that are either mobile or fixed generating capacities in residential homes. Most of these are 8-bed facilities, either ICF or CRCF facilities. There's probably 20 or 30 of those around the state that either have fixed units or have a switch where we can bring one of our mobile generators from one of our regional centers in to help them with a outage of power for extended period of time. That's a diesel fuel generator that we move the generator and the tank of diesel to those sites. So there's various ways that we could go with this and trying to provide ability in all our counties. We could ask, what I would recommend us doing is ask for more funding from FEMA. Do a third application to incorporate for those counties that want it. Now, like I mentioned last month, there were some boards that didn't want to participate, and it is a responsibility. Generators aren't just cheap. You got to maintain them, you got to service them, you got to bring contractors in to fix them, repair them, and keep them going. You got to maintain them through daily or monthly drills and things like that. So some providers either didn't feel like they had the capability or didn't want to deal with it, but we could do another solicitation, see which ones wanted to participate in a third application, and see if we could get some funding through that mechanism to help offset the cost. Because we're thinking that, as you can see from the previous ones, they're running around $175,000 for these fixed units on these large data facilities. And we've got, let's say 25 or 30 sites or areas in the state that aren't currently generated up. That would be over $4 million and that we would need to do a fixed generator at one of these large sites. There's another alternative where we could bring in a design team, design and put a switch, a large electrical switch that you could put on a building. You have to wire up the building to make sure it would work, and then you could bring in one of these companies that specialize in bringing in mobile large generators to, when there's a power outage in that county or whatever, you can bring them in, rent them for a period of time. Of course, there's cost in doing all that, but that's probably the cheapest way to try to move forward with trying to stabilize all areas of the state with the generator capacity. But I think the best option would be, from a staff standpoint, would be to try to solicit another funding source from FEMA through a third application. Just throwing that out for y'all to consider and think about. Any questions on what I've said?
Any other questions or discussion?
On the concept, just thinking back as an executive director, if you're moving people in the middle of an ice storm or a flood, would it be less expensive or the same cost or a whole lot more cost if you had, let's say, 10 4-bed CTHs? How much is a normal household generator bring, and what would the maintenance on that be versus putting a great big day program generator there? Is it going to be more? Would it be more? Just
I think it'll be a lot more to generate
everyone.
We got 1,200 or so around the state.
I know. I'm just wondering, in different counties, would they be given a choice that they could do one? Because what works in one doesn't necessarily work for everything.
Well, from FEMA standpoint, they will not participate.
They
won't participate in residential. They only participate in large sheltering workshops.
Yeah. And this is our only funding source for this.
Well, it's the main source, yeah, that we're using right now.
So it's not an option.
No,
none of the counties want to chip in?
None
of the counties want to chip in and help us with this?
Well, they did originally. You remember,
yeah,
a few months back, y'all changed that up. They were going to provide 25% of the match.
Yeah.
And y'all as commission decided to put DDSN to pay that share. So originally, in the original application, it was a local match. We were participating by having the professional design it and bid it, and then make sure the work was done appropriately. That was our share. And then they were gonna participate in some of the funding up to 25%. But now they don't have any other costs other than the routine, the normal upkeep of it and the, you know, all that, so.
So you got a lot of red down there on the coast.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. Charleston, Berkeley, Jasper, yep.
Well, you definitely have to go in for that first.
Go for that third one.
Okay.
All right.
I still have one comment.
Yeah, I want to, with Coastal Center, we are able to shelter in place on the coast because it's not only because of generators. It's because we have hurricane shutters and all these other things that make it possible to shelter in place. I am in no way, shape, or form saying we don't want to have generator capacity in Charleston, but if there is a mandatory evacuation because of a weather or other event, I don't know that having a generator at that day program will prevent that mandatory evacuation, because I can't make the same argument to request to shelter in place that we can make for the regional centers, because there's other pieces that a generator would not fix. So, I mean, I also just kind of want to make sure you guys are aware of that. If the whole area is required to evacuate, having a generator at that day program is probably not going to prevent that. I'm not saying having a generator at that day program is a bad idea. Just make sure you have the bigger picture.
Plus Coastal Center is 35 miles from the coast.
True.
Will you have some other?
Yeah, I'm getting the big picture, and I can't for the life of me understand why we're balking at this. You know, this is, you know, we're so concerned about consumer safety and all of this day in and day out. We have people eloping and going out and getting hit by cars, but yet here we have some ability to maybe control the destiny of the lives in their hands, and we don't seem to be moving fast enough to do that. Because someday it's going to happen. It doesn't have to be a hurricane, it could be a tornado comes through in a flash. We've got people stuck in a house for 3 days, they hadn't been moved, whatever it may be. We have to have the ability to move people to a conditioned space. That's all I care about. It doesn't matter where they are, they have to be able to get them there to a conditioned space. Because we will lose somebody in 110-degree heat in Columbia, South Carolina, or Charleston, South Carolina. And I just don't get, I feel like I'm a man alone on an island here. I don't understand why everybody's not just talked around the wheel over this. I would suggest you do this for the next round. You go and get the next round, figure out where it's best utilized, and then we go for another round. And we just keep asking. We dry that source up, we figure out another source.
Or even approach the state for some one-time money.
We can do all sorts of things. I think we need to stay on it. We just really do.
Was the original requirement of 25% from the county programs, did that play into maybe their decision not to participate? And with that gone, do you think you might have some other takers?
Good point.
Okay.
No, we could definitely do a call out for solicitation again for who is interested in going there.
It's kind of land, huh?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of land right here.
And keep in mind, we have that capital improvement money that very often we have a little bit here, a little bit there left over from projects, or we never do those projects that we have to recycle in 5 years. If this becomes a priority in the strategic planning, we can take some of that money and move it towards generators, and we've got almost $10 million in there.
But that's for, I'll restate, that money is for state-owned facilities. These are not state-owned facilities. So we would have to do something that's not appropriate in the law right now.
No, I understand what you're saying, but we don't have that all state-owned facilities right now either. So if we want to prioritize it.
Right, but what we're talking about here are locally owned facilities.
Yeah.
But I think we understand the urgency. We're trying. I mean, we went in battle. It took us, I want to take it, Joe, 2 years, 3 years to get that first application through the process and get it to approval.
After we submitted it, it was more than 600 days before it was approved.
So we've been fighting it, we stayed with it. Some along the way dropped out because they got tired of waiting and going through that rigorous process. We had to refile and all that. It took a lot of effort from Joan's staff and her diligence to move forward. So we understand.
I think we need to counsel those.
Sir?
We need to counsel those that dropped out.
Okay.
All right, Tom, let's go on to the
Yes,
next
ma'am.
one. Thank you very much for that discussion.
Tab 11 is a request for y'all to consider transferring some property on Whitten Center campus to the city of Clinton. It's got a lot of bullets here. I'm going to highlight some of the bullets and take questions if you got them. This kind of reverts back to 2013 when the department, with commission approval at that time, when we got out of the utility business at Whitten Center. And we had our own electrical grid up there, and we were trying to maintain that. We lost a lot of expertise and didn't have the skill sets to maintain that grid. So we went to City of Clinton and worked with them.
Can I interrupt for a second because there's a lot of confused spaces. Apparently the tabs got a little messed up. The information that Tom's referring to is in tab 12, not tab 11. So
Okay, sorry.
it's okay. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
So we went to City of Clinton and worked out a process to upgrade the grid and transfer the grid over to City of Clinton. City of Clinton is the utility company in that area. So that worked out beautifully, and we had a great relationship and moving forward with that transfer of that utility. Now we're back to the point where we got the same problems in the water and the sewage and the storm drainage systems and dams on the campus at Whitten Center that we have to maintain and don't have the expertise to maintain. And with the floods of 2 years ago, all that's been reemphasized, maintaining dams, making sure that their spillways are properly working, the gates are properly working, and we talked with City of Clinton. We've been working with them for 2 years. It's taken us a while. The city manager left and we've got a new guy in there, so we had to kind of reestablish ourselves with that process. But we want to go forward with this proposal of transferring some surplus land, and we need y'all to surplus some extra acreage on the campus up there. And then transfer all those utilities that I just mentioned, plus the dam, and also have a second egress coming out of the backside of Whitten Center so that there was a railroad incident on the front part of the campus. We have a way to get people out, and they agreed to maintain a road outside to the outside on the back half of the campus. This is all positive in being able to get out of this and also get upgrades. They're willing to come in and upgrade the water system, the sewage system, the storm drainage system. It was built many years ago for a population of 2,000 or 3,000 folks on that campus, or wherever it was back at that time. Of course, Whitten Center is down below 200 folks. We don't need the large piping systems that we have. It's hard to maintain. It gets clogged up because it's not flowing properly and all that. So City of Clinton is willing to come in and invest money in there to get it to a more current capacity, get it up to upgrades to current codes and all that. So there's 847 acres on the map. I think that's the last page of y'all's handout. There's a map. Track B there in the middle was what y'all approved several years ago, surplus. We're coming back to you to ask you to surplus track A, track C, and then that general commercial piece of land that's got the red bar right there around it. So there's those three sections. Track B's already been surplus a couple years ago. So it's a total of 847 acres of land, 384 already previously surplus by you. And in surplusing that, we would then work with the Department of Administration and the State Financial Accountability Authority to work out all the agreements and get approval from them to move forward with this transfer of land versus them City of Clinton taking over the utilities that I mentioned and the dams and having a second egress and all that. They estimate, City of Clinton estimates it's about $7 to $9 million impact. That over time, that's what it would cost us to try to upgrade all those water systems and sewage systems and storm drainage and maintain the dams and all that. So we've been talking with the parents group up at Whitten. They're on board with us. The legislative delegation of Lawrence County is on board with us. Lawrence City of Clinton is going to use some of the land for economic development. Some of the land is going to be green space where our consumers at Whitten Center would be able to go and participate in some parks and activities the two lakes that are up there on that back part of the campus will still be maintained. They can go and still use those facilities for lake activities and things like that in years to come. So all that's in this proposal and this agreement. We think it's a good deal. We ask for your approval to surplus those remaining acreage and agree to transfer this land for the utility.
Do I have any discussion?
That second egress, is that gonna create any through traffic?
No, ma'am. It'd just be for coming out the back part of the campus.
Okay.
And there might be, some people might use that to go to other parts of that, because they're gonna develop it, like I said, green space and parks and recreational type things. And just leave up, some of it just open space for hiking trails and things like that. So there'll probably parking areas around there somewhere in the back, they don't want to affect us getting out of there.
Anybody else? Do I have a motion?
So,
Have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Good one. Thank you. So we go on to the next, it's a Burton Center roof replacement.
This tab 12 or tab 11?
Tab 11.
Tab 11, okay. All right, tab 11. This is a request for some one-time capital funds to Burton Center for their day program in Greenwood, South Carolina. We're asking for your approval to contribute, DDSN to contribute 50% of the lowest acceptable bid, up to a maximum of $700,000 for roof replacement on the Burton Center day program. Total project budget is for 84,000 square feet of day program area, projected to be about $1.4 million in total cost, which includes the professional design fees and service fees of a roofing consultant. We did a small grant several years ago to do the front part of the day facility up there, where there was major leaks at that time. There's major leaks all through the building now that need to be fixed. Some of the sub roofing might need to be taken up because there's active leaks going on in the building right now. We're asking for you to approve this so we can do it in one single swoop, so we can get economic scale of pricing instead of doing it in sections and having to bring in the large cranes and all that to fix one area and then a year later come back and do the same thing for another section of area of the building. We want to do it all at one time. Hopefully there would be better pricing because of that. The professional roofing consultant is engaged at this point to help the project design and scope. The procurement process will follow DDSN's review and approval of the final plans and specifications. Joan and her staff would be involved with the roofing consultant to make sure all things are done right and make sure the roofing was done to the specs that were laid out. So we're asking for your approval. Once it's bidded out, we will come back and let you approve the final pricing of the project. We can let you see what the final effects of the solicitation and what the whole price came back as.
Okay.
So we ask for your approval. Yes, ma'am.
Any discussion?
How do you determine that you're gonna provide up to $700,000 for Burton Center roof and $1.5 million for Chesco's day program? I mean, is there a procedure where you say, okay, we've got this much money and we want all of y'all to apply and we're gonna decide who needs what the most, or is it just like one day you're just gonna do this for Burton Center? You see where I'm going with that? It's
Right.
just not a real clear process to me.
We ask for capital applications time and time again. We know what's out there currently in our system, what the major issues that are going on in our facilities, and we prioritize them based on where the dollars are and where the needs are in our state. So we're constantly asking, soliciting, knowing what's going on, and then from there we make decisions. And normally in the past we've tried to participate up to half of the cost. We have the funding to do that. So Burton Center has some reserve. They're going to use that to bridge the gap between what we can provide to what they're going to provide for the total project cost. Sometimes we've gone over that and funding the needs of that individual provider based on their financial position.
We prioritize life safety issues like repeated,
True.
like multiple
ADA.
roofs leaks, and so as far as if we have more requests than we have money, which we often do, we prioritize based on life and safety, health codes, those type of things. So,
There's fire sprinkler systems, fire alarms, bathroom, ADA compliance things are priority, definitely.
Okay, so we're 4 months into the operating budget, and was this in the spending plan?
It was part of that.
Capital improvement? Okay, so just one sidebar on that capital improvement. Once you move it in there, it's a state. Once you move it into that secret account, it has to go to the state projects.
For that component of the spending plan. There was another component that was not for state facilities, it was for local providers.
I know, I saw that, but this is a lot of that. How much is in there?
2.4, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. One of the things I think we need to look at in planning is we just really need to look at that process and make sure that it is beyond reproach, because this is where we get into trouble. And get accused of favoritism. You know, just think it's this, then think it's that, now we didn't get anything. So we need a clear-cut process of determination. That's a lot of money. It's over $500,000. When we get to doing rent-on-day programs and stuff like that, that has gotten us into trouble. So when we do our planning, I would just want us to look at that process and come up with some way that we know is objective and not in any way subjective.
Okay. He's still asking for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
That's it. Well, thank you very much. That is we are getting on, I need a motion to discuss the state, to go into executive session. At this time, we discuss the state director's evaluation plan. Contractual matter with early intervention, provide and receive legal advice.